So currently in the Dallas Metroplex, it is literally, what do we got here? 14 degrees outside. I think the wind chill has it feeling even colder. Because of the wind chill, it feels like -2. For us folks that live in the Dallas Metroplex, that is good googly moogly cold. We're not used to that type of just feeling of being cold. So I came out here to make myself some coffee and just really think about, because of that cold weather, it kind of makes you slow down a little bit, makes you think a little bit, and made me think, like, what are the 2024 predictions I see happening in everyday carry for this year? Specifically, I have 5. These really pertain towards pocket knives and boomsticks, but they may pertain in other areas as well. But I just kind of see where the industry itself is predictably going one way or another. Now, we will look at this video again later on this year or early next year to see, well, how did I do? I think 4 out of 5 is passing when you're only given 5 of them, right? And so the first one is higher end brands, I believe, are going to start to pierce the budget market. Now, what I mean by piercing the budget market, imagine your Spydercos, your Civivi, not even your Civivis, your Benchmades. I think they're going to start to offer more budget offerings in this space this year, because they realize that a lot of folks just want that nice, simple budget option, knock it out, be done with it, and kind of just make themselves have as much money, as much bang for their buck as possible. They may even white glove, or they may OEM from other manufacturers, similar to what like Obi does with Kaiser, or they may do a good, better, best, similar to what Sencut, Civivi, and We Knife does with their brand. So I just really see these brands offering more budget options, especially if they have the ability to do so. If you're the type of brand that has a scaling, you're a large production type of knife maker, and you have the ability to scale up, make more offerings for the actual budget market, you're going to do that. One thing that we can realize is that less and less people are walking into a physical brick and mortar store nowadays to actually buy the items that they want, especially when it comes to pocket knives and boomsticks. You know, maybe for boomsticks, but for pocket knives, we're watching reviews, we're reading articles, we're just familiar with the brand that we like. And when we see a different variant come out, if we see something come out that looks interesting to us, we don't need to go into a brick and mortar store to decide like, hey, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and buy this one. This one is for me. We can kind of make those decisions without doing all of that. So people are realizing that their dollar stretching further and further in the budget space. I talked about this last video, but you could easily spend no more than 2 hours of your pay and get a quality knife that in theory probably could last a lifetime, just because of how these budget knives are being pumped out nowadays. When you're getting a nice CR, you know, the budget knives back in the day, and I say back in the day, 2-3 years ago, were CRKT tuna. You felt pretty good about it, and you just kind of got what you got. Now you can get stuff like the Civivi Baby Banter. You can get some stuff like the Civivi Elementum, especially the button lock, which is one of my favorites to recommend. You can get stuff from Sencut. You also have stuff from Remit. There's just so many knife, especially Chinese knife makers, that are just coming out with a lot of different options that people don't need to spend $185 on a bug out anymore. Especially as, yeah, you're getting the steel and you're getting all the other stuff, but what else are you really getting for spending that type of money other than getting the branding name, the butterfly tax, as some people like to say. That's my first point. More companies dipping their toes into the budget space. But my second point kind of goes alongside that. I think that we're going to have some crazy sales this year. Now, I said first point will be budget. People are dipping their toes into the budget space, and they're going to do stuff like possibly, you know, they may not want to diminish their brand, so maybe they'll come out with some different options. But I can also foresee brands just having crazy sales on current knives, current gen knives. I can see brands having sales on those. Now, this may not happen with micro brands. This may not happen with the new knife makers, people that are popping up now and pumping out stuff. But brands that have like a large surplus of stuff, they've had a big stock of items, I could easily see them having a sale to diminish their stock from last year. So think about some of the sales that we had last year. We had sales that kind of started before Black Friday. Black Friday was an entire month of sales from some of these knife makers. And then it turned into Cyber Monday, and then it turned into Cyber Week. And some knife brands still have the exact sales going on. Maybe they've changed it a little bit. It's not the same percentage amount, but they still have a big, decent sale going on when it comes to their actual knives. What's going on? Why are they still having the sales going on when it's been nearly 3-4 months since Black Friday? I think that some of these companies do have the surplus going on with their stock. I don't think the sales are going to be to the point where they're diminishing their own brand. I really don't see that happening. But having crazy sales this year, this may be the year, okay? You've been having your eye out on something from the butterfly tax. That I think some sales may happen with them, which is super rare. You've been having your eye out on maybe a Chris Reeve. Some sales may happen there as well, even though they don't really have a surplus of stock. But this may be one of my predictions that's completely wrong, but the sales just were so increasingly long this year in comparison to 2022. 2023, the sales just were just so much longer. I could see them having some crazy sales. The next one is a little bit more of a sad one, but my third prediction is I see bankruptcies and closures for some of these companies. That could be boomsticks or knives. I can see these companies having to fold up the tent, go home. Now, in 2023, we did see an expansion and opening of a lot of micro brands. I saw a lot of brands on Instagram popping up, and a lot of folks, a lot of knife makers, maybe we're going from journeyman into the next level, whatever they call it in the world of becoming a master bladesmith. And they were opening up shops, whether in their basements or attics, or they rented out a shop or whatever. But they weren't doing it full time. It's kind of a side gig. I see a lot of micro brands possibly suffering because of the bigger brands doing those first two items, them diving into budget, them having crazy sales, which means that these micro brands may have to fold up the tent, which is actually pretty sad when you think about it, because a lot of those are small businesses. But at the same time, I can see some brands that are a little bit bigger than a micro brand having to fold up the tent as well. Ontario Knife Company had to call it quits. And specifically, I know for their folders, I don't know if they're still going to be making fixies under another name. If somebody, I know they were bought out. So someone else, it's similar to how DeWalt was bought out, you know, in the 1900s. And they used to only make radial arm saws, and now we know them for power tools, right? So that could happen with Ontario Knife, where whoever bought them lets them live on as well. But there's a lot of companies that just don't have the capital to keep staying afloat in the current economy, with folks that are leaning towards budget. If you're a custom knife maker or micro brand, you don't have the overhead, right? You can't spread your overhead and G&A costs across more customers because you can't scale as much as a production company can. What the hell does that mean? You have overhead costs that you have to make. You have buy materials, you have utilities that you have to pay. You may have tradesmen that you pay to help you out. Maybe you don't make the scales or whatever. And to pay those fees, if you have more customers, you could scale that out across more people. But if you only have a few customers a year because of your micro branding, because of how much you pump out, you may have to foot some of that out of your own personal pay, and that may not be sustainable. You may have larger companies that have receiverships that are coming up, receiverships that are purchased by other companies, receiverships that come up that they can't handle, and they have to fold up the tent. So unfortunately, bankruptcies and closures I see happening this year. Another thing I also kind of see is I don't see any new groundbreaking knives coming out in 2024. And maybe the micro brands, yes, but I'm talking about these large scale companies that could like change the face of stuff. And the last time we seen something that was like big like that was Tactile Knife Company's Archer. And that was a very nice knife, frame lock type. But At the end of the day, when you really break it down into its simplicity, it's similar to a lot of innovations some of these other companies are doing. Titanium scaled knives, high-end finishes, well done, works really well, but there's not really innovation per se. Now, who's going to be the company that starts innovating and starts putting tech into knives? I don't know. Do we need that? Probably not. But I'm just telling you, I don't see any major groundbreaking new innovations in this space. Folks are trying to reduce their stock. Folks are trying to maintain cash flow with the things that they're already able to make. The only ones that I would see have an exception to this are the big boys out there that could do that. ProTech, the Benchmades, the Spydercos, the Chris Reeve, the even like Spyderco and We Knife. Those companies that have so much capital, so many customers, so much scaling and equipment that they might be able to innovate. But I don't know if that's going to happen per se. That kind of leads me to my last prediction, which I don't think there's going to be any new regulations when it comes to pocket knives or boomsticks for that matter. I can't see the Consumer Product Protection Board or whatever they call it coming in and needing to regulate some new regulation because of safety issues or something that happened within the real world where they need to limit the size of the knife or the materials of the knife. And I really don't see that happening in 2024, it being an election year where major regulations for major industries could come out where that could be a wedge issue in the electorate. I don't see that happening. And also because regulations move extremely slow. In my daily job, I audit defense contractors, okay? The big boys of the world. Any of those tier 8, if you look up tier 8 contractors, I audit them to make sure that they're following the rules of the government. Well, the regulations that I follow take years to change. Even though in my head we need changes because of this or because of that, it doesn't happen that quick. And we are nowhere near as big of an audit or as a regulation over a finite amount of defense contractors as there are people that own pocket knives and boomsticks. So I just don't see large regulations coming out. So if you were worried about that, if you're worried about us turning into the UK and not having, knives at slip joint only or something like that, that's not going to happen this year. Comment down below though, what do you think are some predictions for the EDC space, specifically pocket knives and boomsticks for 2024? Do you think I hit or miss on these 5 predictions? I don't know. This is kind of me just shooting the shit. I got some notes and just wanted to have my morning Americano and thought about what's really going to happen in this space for 2024. If this is your first time stopping by, hit the subscribe button. I would love to have you part of the battalion. If this is not your first time stopping by, well, thank you once again for joining me in the man cave, watching me run my grape. For everyone else, we'll speak soon.